Do you think we're really getting ahead of ourselves here with AI? Is it really that silver bullet, or is it just going to augment things we're already doing?
I think it's barking mad.
There you go, right? Okay, so Steve, last time we were talking about digital fitness and what we need to do to really accelerate our capabilities in this increasingly digital world. But one of the things you and I have talked a lot about, I remember when I first joined the company I'm with now, Adapt, back in 2019, and you and I did a on-screen video, and we were talking about many things, but the L word came up, the legacy word. Yeah. It seems that whatever we're trying to do, we're encumbered by legacy. And it's interesting, I was doing a roundtable actually a few weeks ago, and we decided to stop calling it legacy and call it heritage. We felt heritage was a better word, okay? So dealing with heritage. But I'm kind of interested to explore that a bit more, because whatever we talk about, I have so many conversations with CIOs, and obviously you've been a CIO, and it always comes back to, but we're really struggling with all this technology legacy, this technology debt. So before we can do anything, we've got to overcome this. So where do you think we need to start when we're thinking about legacy in general? Because it seems to be, it's one of those things which by default never goes away. Whatever we buy today is tomorrow's legacy if we don't plan effectively.
Yes. And it all comes down to enterprise architecture and a kind of mindfulness about how you're traveling in the long run. The digital fitness element is still critical in my perspective, because that is the means to execute a project of any sort or size. Yeah. In the end, replacing big legacy applications is a project like any other. And in some cases, they are necessarily big bang waterfall kind of implementations because of their scale and complexity and organizational pervasiveness. But that has to be the last resort. Because by far the smarter way these days is to nibble away at the big legacy systems incrementally in modules, front-end them, integrate them through modern middleware layers, and try and break up the problem into a program of smaller initiatives, which kind of takes me back to why digital fitness is so critical. Because it's my experience that big bang kind of legacy migration projects are toxic. And so so it's all about trying to find an alternative to that. What is the alternative?
And to that point, Steve, you and I have spoken in the past, in terms of organizations come out and say, right, we're cloud first, we're all in the cloud, 100% in the cloud, everything, we're not doing anything else. And you said to me, again, coming back to that sort of big transformation conversation. And I think when you were at Vic Health, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you got to well over 70% of workloads in the public cloud. But again, when you and I spoke, coming back to your incrementalism point, you didn't set out and say at the beginning, like the big transformation, we're going to be 70% in the cloud. Right. But in the back of your mind, you knew you had to get there, but you kind of worked through that incrementally. Yeah.
So, Steve, I'm interested how you create that business case for an incremental change in legacy systems, because people see in some ways the legacy is a millstone around an organization's neck. It's an old way of thinking. It's not embracing new functionality, all of those sorts of things. But it is a way of working for people. So it's a safety zone or a comfort zone for a lot of the workforce. So they're intimidated by the thought of changing from it. But if you're talking about the evolution being incremental, while that may make it digestible, how do you get the funding for something? Yeah. How do you say we're going to do it in pieces? And how do you convince people that that's a good argument to follow?
Yeah, it's tricky. And it comes down to it all comes down to what the organization's biggest problems are. Really. And so if it's the case that the legacy system in question is just like a massive millstone and there is no way to progress without dealing with it, then you're just stuck with having to mount the big case, get the big money, run the big project. But in large, complicated organizations, that's seldom the case. More often the case in my experience that there is a very large number of net new application use cases which drive the innovation in the organization and don't necessarily require dealing with the legacy capability head on in a sense of a massive big project, because you can integrate to it through smart APIs, you can front end it, you can add modular capability to it. And doing all of those things, whilst it might not seem to have the same, big ambition, is much, much more practical, faster, and drives innovation much more quickly. And it builds capacity. Capacity in the IT organization to deliver stuff, but also capacity in the user group of the organization to learn new ways of doing things, new ways of working incrementally, and to become more receptive to the idea of modern digital ways of doing things. If you can do all that, then when the time is right, when you can get the money, when you're feeling confident, when your digital fitness is good enough, then you could, as it were, pluck up the cojones to tackle the legacy. Yeah.
But where does data come into that, though? Because part of the value of those legacy systems is all the information they contain about customers and citizens and people like that. And if you're evolving, do the links through an API enable you to get to that data, or is the format of that data usable by some of the modern functions?
It's awkward and difficult at times, but yes, by and large, there are ways around it. And more and more of the data lives in data warehouses and lakes outside of legacy systems, etc.
So you're saying you shouldn't use data as a sort of roadblock to making progress from legacy systems.
No. And like the exception would be, you're living in a world that's so cashed up with capital that and maybe many organizations have this character, but banks and such like, but that is not the case in big public sector organizations. Yeah.
Well, you talk a lot about, see, when you think about public sector organizations, that it's kind of feast or famine, right, when it comes to funding in many ways. And one of the points you made to us was that as you think about the kind of feast or famine, you said you can't always engineer things that work in a flood, right, at the end of the day. So kind of, and the other point you made also, I know we talk a lot about public sector, was that we need to recognize that, private sector can fall into the same trap as well if they're not careful, right? So can you maybe unpack a bit for me, how do we manage this kind of feast or flood mindset, if you like, famine or flood rather?
Yeah, so that's back to the ability to manufacture a multi-year funding stream kind of a concept, and it's very difficult. And but there is an effect which happens when you do have digital fitness and you are delivering projects, which is a greater sense of confidence in the boardroom or the executives that if you were given money, you would do something useful with it. And that in itself, and a demonstrated kind of doing things with not too much money, that creates a more practical financing conversation than the sort of opposite conversation, which is often true, which is, oh my God, we're unfit. We need to run the marathon. The only way to run the marathon is to hire 55 coaches, and blah, blah, blah. So there is a circular logic, a kind of upward positive effect on money, because the opposite is often true in government, where things are so desperate that government decides the only way to make any progress is to throw money at it. And that's almost certainly at the time when digital fitness is so low that it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. The organization does not have the capacity to execute.
Well, and the outcome of an investment like that, if it fails, it just tarnishes the whole name of IT and the IT execs in the organization. It's a what do we call it? It's a curse rather than a blessing.
It does, but also I think building on that a bit more, Stephen and Peter as well, is that I'm listening, when you have these sort of crises, look on them as an opportunity, right? So yes, we've got to be digitally fit, but if there is this crisis and everyone's running around, quick, we've got to spend money, that's kind of the flood, right? And okay, it's a crisis, but we got to take advantage of it at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's no. You take money any way you can get it. Is one thing. Yeah. But by far the better, the flood is dangerous. People drown in the flood.
I want to bring in the AI word or AI conversation here, Steve, as well, because I think we need to touch on that as well, because I think when you talk about sort of incrementalism versus big transformation, I think AI by default is actually accelerating or driving us down that incremental path, because if we think we can plan for 3 years from now, we can barely plan for 2 weeks. It's kind of really, I think, shaping things up in general. So do you think that in itself is going to change not just how we operate, but the people within our organizations, even the leaders within our organizations, how they think as well, that they will actually now start to expect this kind of incremental approach because they recognize that that's what's needed at the moment?
Yes. Well, everyone wants to be agile, shall we say, to use that word, which is let's say a legacy generation word, but, and they bring the same kind of expectation to AI, and this whole idea that it's quick and easy and you just, whistle it up, which is so not true. But it only is true if you have digital fitness.
Because but there is also... Sorry, Steve, I was going to say there is also this view of AI. You see you can do something simple like create an email, and then you think, it can do anything, so you don't know the complexities of going into the bigger environment.
Correct, exactly. But the concept of digital fitness is the idea that you are in the mix of all of this all the time, delivering innovations, partnering with your vendors, using modern tooling, probably that's embedded in your strategic platforms. And AI then, in that regard, is just another way of doing digital application development and managing projects and producing materials. So if you are picking up and using and learning and developing AI capabilities, that's just enhancing your digital fitness.
We've done a lot of podcasts here at Boom or Bust, and we've kind of got two camps when it comes to AI amongst our viewers and listeners. Some of them are kind of all in on AI. They see the opportunity, the benefit. But then, there's a cohort out there who think we're a little bit too positive about AI's potential out in the marketplace in general. I actually think I wouldn't say negative, but I've been a bit more questioning than many. But do you think we're really getting ahead of ourselves here with AI? Is it really that silver bullet, or is it just going to augment things we're already doing?
I think it's barking mad.
Right.
I must say, I get very dismayed about it in some ways. But clearly, something huge is happening, and it's really hard to get your mind around. But at the end of the day, from my perspective, I think its potential from an enterprise IT perspective is more as a tool, a way of doing things for IT professionals, architects, engineers, application developers to use. And, to come back to the legacy renewal thing, the huge potential that I'm quite interested in from that perspective is refactoring of legacy applications using AI tooling. As it were, the AI agents just read the source code and infer the specification of the system, which probably no longer exists, and generate at least a first beta version good enough to start refining and testing. That's a big hope for some of the big legacy migrations.
And it's interesting where you talked about Barking mad, right? So us, let's call us three salty, IT salty dogs, right? Here gathered collectively here together.
Grey hair.
And we've seen kind of, these cycles come and go. And I'll give you an example, because if you look at someone like Intel, for example, and, following their kind of stock prices and that sort of thing, you go back maybe 12 months ago and Intel was almost being written off. It's kind of, they've lost their way. They haven't gone the AI wave. So in steps US government, they invest in them. This word inference is being thrown around all over the place at the moment in terms of kind of reigniting their capability. Now Intel's stock price, from memory, is higher than it's ever been in its life. So it's gone from almost being written off to now through ridiculous heights of growth. And do you really think this stuff's sustainable right at the end of the day? I know you said barking mad.
Yeah.
I think we've seen these hype cycles come and go. I'm questioning when the reckoning is going to come,
Oh no, there's too much hype and centralization of media kind of messaging and stuff, so that everyone's smoking everyone else's exhaust gases kind of stuff. And it's kind of crazy and overhyped.
Yeah,
and they've got vested interest of carrying that narrative forward. So I think that.
Yeah.
How do you trust the messenger in a world like that?
That's right.
Yeah, and it's all just happening too quickly and too kind of crazily for everyone to really comprehend the reality of it.
I did a couple of roundtables last week, and one of the messages that came out of them quite strongly is, you can't ignore this. This is going to change the way things are going.
That's
so
right.
Don't sit on the fence and think it'll disappear. It's going to be part of our lives.
I think we're beyond that now. I think that, to your point, that people aren't sitting on the fence. They're barking in the backyard, right?
Yeah, but I suppose the question I was going to ask is, how do you get this sanity in your use of AIs? How do you learn? How do you create the sandpit, the guardrails, so you can start to introduce it into your environment and be confident of the outcomes?
Well, you just have to get onto it. That is exactly the thing. Even in big high security agencies, there are a large number of AI pilots, proof cases, experimental projects, many of which are using the AI capability, which is now embedded in core enterprise platforms.
I think that's a good segue into what we want to talk about next, Steve, in terms of the whole governance conversation as well. But if I kind of think back on what we just talked about, there's kind of a couple of things that stood out for me. And first is don't wait for the flood. Like, the flood's going to come, but build capability in the drought as well, I think, is really important. Use crises as windows. They always say never waste a good crisis, right? So as everyone's running around in crisis mode saying we've got to do this, got to do that, then think about how that can help you plan more effectively for the future. But I think also when we look at AI, apart from it kind of the whole environment being barking mad, and I remember Cal Henderson, the co-founder of Slack, saying to me in a conversation, they haven't created a hype cycle big enough for AI yet, kind of thing.
Yes.
That kind of But as we think about AI, think about it in terms of how that can help us augment a lot of that incrementalism we're taking to get to those kind of big transformation capabilities as well, would be three things.
Okay. Exactly.
Okay.
All right. So we'll go on now, and I think it's sounding quite good. Steve, you happy how this is going?
Yeah, good.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Apart from Matt and me having the old argument, you're okay with that?
That's all good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
I might quote you on stage tomorrow and say an ex-CIO who I know told me AI is barking mad.
Yeah.